Hi friends, last thing we need to take a look at here today are illusions and subliminal messages, which are always fun. So the first thing you have to realize when we're perceiving things is that usually we abide by the principle of constancy, which is the tendency to perceive certain objects the same way regardless of the changing angle, distance, or lighting. For example, you still see your door the same whether it's closed, partially open, or entirely open. However, there are times whenever our brain can be tricked, and that's whenever we experience illusions. These are perceptions that misrepresent physical stimuli. Your perceptual cues are distorted in some way. Your brain cannot correctly interpret the size, space, and depth cues that it's being bombarded with. So let's take a look at a couple common examples. For this one, which monster is bigger? So if you remember back to linear perspective and whatnot, your brain is trying to treat this two-dimensional image as a three-dimensional image, which makes it look like the monster in the back is bigger than the monster in the front. But if you measure them, they are the exact same size. If you don't believe me, pause this, measure it. They are the exact same size. So what about this one? This is called the Hering illusion. It was discovered by Ewald Hering in 1861. And the horizontal lines are both actually straight, but they look a little bit bowed because of the false sense of depth that has been created. This next one is pretty cool. This is the Hermann grid illusion. This was reported by Ludomir Hermann in 1870, and when you're looking at this, you'll see ghost-like gray blobs perceived at the intersection. However, when you try to look directly at the blobs, they disappear. This next one takes it to the next level. This is the scintillating grid illusion, which was discovered in 1994. On this one, you should see white dots on the gray bars and black dots that randomly appear and disappear quickly. This one, I don't have the name for this particular illusion, but it creates the illusion of both depth and motion if you stare at the center circle. This one does the same thing with the juxtaposition of color, shape, etc. So the last thing that we're really going to talk about here is subliminal perception. Subliminal perception in its true form are brief auditory or visual messages that are presented below the absolute threshold. The absolute threshold, if you recall, is what you can detect 50% of the time. So true subliminal messages are below that threshold, therefore you do not consciously perceive them. The idea here is that it impacts only the unconscious mind. So there was a huge controversy about this back in the 1970s, when an advertiser by the name of James Vickery falsely claimed that movie theaters were flashing the words "drink Coke and eat popcorn" into the previews that occurred before movie theater, and that then in these particular movie theaters that were doing that, Coke and popcorn sales increased significantly. There's no actual evidence that that subliminal messages influence behavior, and he eventually admitted that he made the whole thing up. That being said, because we don't like to believe that we're being tricked into buying things, the FCC condemned the use of subliminal messages. So you're not allowed to use it. And in today's day and age, nothing ever remains a secret. So if a company was using a subliminal message, then it would be found out. It would destroy their relationship with the public. No one would ever trust them again. And it would do terrible things for them, economically speaking. Today, there are like hidden images, if you will. They're not considered to really be subliminal. They're there for you to see them if you are so inclined to look for them. But the idea is that, again, subconsciously you pick up on these and that it impacts your buying. So let's take a look at a few. This is probably the most well-known one. This is the FedEx logo. And right in here, in between the E and the X in the white space, is an arrow. The idea here is that this arrow symbolizes movement, and what's FedEx's job? It's to move things, and so that we subconsciously pick up on that, and it makes us more likely to use FedEx as opposed to like UPS in terms of shipping our packages. This one is the Wendy's symbol, and down here in her collar is written the word mom. Again, the idea here is that most of us have like warm feelings towards both our mother and our mother's cooking, and that in the highly competitive fast food market, like if you associate Wendy's with your mom's cooking, you're more likely to buy Wendy's than McDonald's. So this is one of the most well-known, actually, and famous as well as obvious subliminal works of art. If you look in the white space down here, it spells the word sex. And why are we going to talk about that? Because sex is the most commonly used form of subliminal messages out there. There is a strong belief in the advertising field that sex sells. That's why they use attractive individuals and things like that. That's been disputed, actually, that sex doesn't really sell. But anyway, the common belief out there is still that sex sells. So there you go. So then if you look at this package of Skittles, is it just a coincidence that we have this big S that we all know is on every single Skittles right in front of explosion? So is it coincidence that it's a sexplosion? And would that really cause someone to purchase Skittles? I don't even know if a sexplosion would be a positive thing. This one does not involve sex, sorry, but what it does involve is money. If you look at the 99-cent KFC snacker, the subliminal message in this one is right here. This is not a piece of lettuce, this is a dollar bill. The idea is that subconsciously you're picking up on the fact that if you just have a dollar bill in your pocket, you too can have this delicious 99-cent KFC snacker. This one is a magazine ad for Palmolive shower gel. And it can be a little bit more difficult to figure out what the subliminal message is here, but this is a man's arm. It is not her arm. Again, it's not something that you might notice if you're just flipping through the magazine quickly, but once you know it's there, you're like, oh yeah, that's definitely a man's arm. The idea being like, oh, her skin's so soft that this guy can't resist touching it. So it's not just in advertisement that we have subliminal messages happening. Disney and animated movies in general have long since been known to put things in their movies that, you have to have an astute eye to pick up on. So this is from the 1977 movie The Rescuers, and if you notice in the window up here, this is in fact a topless woman. There's actually 2 instances within this movie where the animators inserted photos of topless women. I mean, this is a still frame. Within the actual movie itself, this lasts like a second. Disney didn't notice the sabotage until 1999, and when they asked the animators, they were like, yeah, we did that. So Disney tried to recall all 3.4 million VHS copies of the film. If you're watching The Rescuers on like Disney Plus today, or if you have a more recently released version of The Rescuers, there are not topless women in there. This is the cover of Disney's Little Mermaid, and again, the idea here is that the animators kind of snuck some phallic symbols in here, like this castle back here basically looks like a bunch of male genitalia to some individuals who maybe have too much free time on their hand. This is from The Lion King, where some claim that this spells out sex very briefly. The animators of The Lion King have adamantly denied that, and said that that was not in any way, shape, or form intentional on their part. It's not just animated movies, it's also like regular movies as well. So this comes from one of the Harry Potter movies, and you can see back here written on the wall is the word sex. And this one comes from the X-Men movie, and down here in her hair is written the word sex. So subliminal messages can also be auditory. If you go on like websites, they talk about backmasking, which is the idea of recording things when played in reverse have a message. So like Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven was probably the first one and the most well-known of these. Led Zeppelin has totally denied this, but if you listen to it backwards, it allegedly talks about Satan and worshiping Satan. There are others like Queen songs. Another one, Bite the Dust, played backwards, supposedly tells you to smoke marijuana. If you're looking for something to do during quarantine, feel free to, listen to those on YouTube backwards and let me know what you think. Do not worship Satan or smoke marijuana. Last thing, ESP, which stands for extrasensory perception, which is the ability to gain information by some means other than your ordinary senses. There are a couple different types of ESP out there. The first one being clairvoyance, which is the ability to perceive objects or information without any sensory input. So this one would be like people who claim that they can speak with the dead and things like that. Telepathy, which is the ability to read someone's mind or transfer thoughts. So like if I'm sitting here thinking of a number and I see if you can like read my mind, what number am I thinking of? That would be telepathy. Psychokinesis is the ability to move objects through mental effort only. Think of like using the force. Bending a spoon by simply thinking about it. And precognition, which is the ability to foretell events. The problem with these is that there's no way to scientifically prove or disprove them. Anytime there's like a huge tragedy, like a plane crash or something, inevitably there's someone who's like, oh, I didn't get on that flight because I just had a really bad feeling about it. And then that lends a little bit of credibility to the idea of precognition. But what you don't hear about is all the people who had a bad feeling about a flight, didn't get on it, and then nothing bad ever happened to it. So we have to be really skeptical when it comes to ESP. No one can definitively say that it doesn't exist, but there's absolutely no concrete proof that it does exist either. Okay, so that's it for Chapter 8. The last thing that we're going to talk about for this semester is personality. I'll introduce that to you next week. Have a great weekend.